たばかりの瞳が僕を見つめてる雲の雫が降りてきたんだ千年の片へく運命の
Good evening, listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Third Impact Anime Podcast, where our big sisters travel back in time to teach us not to hit them with toy trains. I'm your host, Austin here, and with me I have Tori.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's going.
Good. It's just you and me today.
Yep.
Do you take solace in this, or are you sad that no one else is here?
I'm stuck with you, but I guess it's fine.
You sound a little bit ambivalent about that, but I guess I can forgive you.
It's okay.
Alright, well, you know, since it's just me and Tori here, we're probably reviewing something that we went to see in the theater, because that's typically how that works out. Alright, so, and in this episode, we will be reviewing Mamoru Hosoda's latest film, Mirai, or Mirai of the Future, or Mirai no Mirai, which I'm glad that they didn't call it that, because the American audiences would just be like, what?
Mm-hmm. That's the title when she's, in one frame as a middle schooler, but not as a baby. Mirai, no Mirai. That's really
hilarious. No, that's oh my gosh. I'm supposed to do the bad jokes, not you.
It's me spending too much time with you.
Oh, thank goodness. Finally,
yeah.
you've learned a valuable skill that you can put onto resumes. I also make bad jokes.
If you're listening to this podcast, please help.
They can't hear you because I'll edit that bit out.
Oh no.
Just kidding. I might leave it in. Let's see. We'll see if your cry for help actually falls on listening ears. Rather
I'm blinking twice because I'm in danger.
We're not on YouTube yet because we're not shouty enough for YouTube.
That's fair.
But anyway, we're gonna kind of just jump right into this thing because this is gonna be more of a shorter review just because we're talking about this one movie. But as a general note, just wanted to remind everybody where you can engage with the Third Impact Anime Podcast on the internet. You can find us pretty easily over on Facebook, over at facebook.com/thirdimpactanime. And through that link, you can also find our Facebook community group, which we use pretty much every day to have wonderful anime and video game related discourse. It's a pretty fun little place to gather. And if you want to follow us over on Twitter, which is where we probably update the most frequently, it's over at twitter.com/ti_anime. And our website is thirdimpactanime.wordpress.com, where personally I just put up a anime review of a series that I just watched. I just finished up After the Rain, which I was very pleasantly surprised with. I expected it to be not quite as wholesome as it was, but it really surprised me in how genuine and excellent it was. I think you would really like it, Tori. I know that whenever you saw the initial premise, you sort of felt like I did and thought, I'm a little bit scared of this.
It's
and
like,
you would, yeah, you would be right, and that's definitely valid. But I ended up finding it very, very charming, and it doesn't go in the places that you would expect. So that's dodged a bullet.
That's kind of how I'm hoping for Bloom Into You to go.
I've heard generally good things about Bloom Into You. It hasn't been one of those things that I've seen a lot of people talk about, but whenever it has been discussed, it's been positive. Good indeed. Alright, well, let's just go ahead and jump right into this movie with a little bit of production notes on it. So Mirai is directed and written by Mamoru Hosoda, which probably everyone, if you're an anime fan, within the last couple of years, you've probably heard his name before, and you've probably seen more than likely all of his movies. But if you haven't, he is the director of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, Wolf Children, Summer Wars, and The Boy and the Beast. Figured we might as well give a little bit of background on him since we've never actually talked about any of his stuff on this podcast before. We just haven't made it around to it, but better now than never, I guess. Anyway, So he started out as a key animator in the 1980s, mainly working for Toei during the 90s and the 2000s. He worked on series like Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, Digimon, probably most specifically. Then he worked for Studio Madhouse for a while, where he directed The Girl Who Leapt Through Time in 2006 and Summer Wars in 2009, both with Madhouse. Both of those films won multiple Japanese animation awards and a few international awards as well. In 2011, he spun off into his own studio, Studio Chizu. No, not Studio Cheese, even though that sounds like a wonderful place to be.
Yes.
He then directed Wolf Children and The Boy and the Beast, and now Mirai. So the production staff on Mirai is pretty much identical to Hosoda's previous films, except this time, for who knows why reason, Yoshiyuki Sadamoto did not return as the character designer. He had been the character designer on all of Hosoda's previous films, and Sadamoto is notable to both you and I because he is the character designer for Evangelion, is probably his claim to fame.
But, I didn't even notice that until you happened to point it out, but then thinking back on it, I guess, yeah, that didn't really look like his art at all.
Yeah, it didn't, not so much, like, especially in the, because typically what Hosoda movies have done in the past is that they will have a Sadamoto drawing as, like, the poster. But on this movie, it was sort of the same art style that you would see in the actual, like, movie itself. And the guy that was the character designer, I didn't write his name down, but he had worked as a character animator on all of his other movies. So that's why it looks Sadamoto-ish, but it's still not quite as distinct as his other things.
Gotcha.
Especially in the eyes. Like, Sadamoto has a very unique way to draw eyes.
Yes.
It's very minimalist, but you can easily recognize it, I think. So the animation supervision for this film was done by Hiroyuki Aoyama and Ayako Hata, who are actually a married couple, even though they have different last names. So Hosoda said in an interview that the two of them brought elements of themselves and their married dynamic into the animation of the film, and that he really enjoyed the novelty of having a married couple be the supervising animators, because that's such a rare thing.
Yeah, that's wholesome.
Yeah, I thought that was so unique, especially since this is a movie about, like, a married couple and their sort of life together. So I'm sure they brought a lot of, what they see themselves doing in their ordinary life to the depictions of the couple in this movie, too.
Yeah, and that definitely, I know we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but that definitely brings a sense of naturality to it instead of making it feel so, yes, this is a married couple. But when you have people living those experiences, overseeing and writing and things like that particular scenario, it definitely feels more real.
Absolutely, yeah. And since this is a movie so much about capturing, like, it's a very fantastical film, but it's also about sort of the mundane aspects of, like, raising children. I think that his decision to bring them on is a very good one, because it adds that genuine quality, like you said. So could you do me the honors and read out the voice cast for the film?
Certainly. One of the main characters, Kun, the little boy, is voiced by Moka Kamishirashi, who is actually the younger sister of Monet Kamishirashi. I probably totally mispronounced that incorrectly, but
you pronounced it better than I did, or would have, rather.
Yeah, she is the voice actress who played Mitsuha in Your Name. And this is the little sister's first debut role in anime. In the English version, Kun is voiced by Jaden Waldman, who is 8 years old and a relative newcomer to voice acting. He also plays the male lead in the PBS kids show Pinkalicious and Pewterific, which I'm pretty sure are based on, like, kids' picture books.
Yeah, it's based on a picture book, I think.
Okay. Mirai herself is voiced by Haru Kuroki, who was Yuki in Wolf Children. Young Ichiro Hiko in The Boy and the Beast. Has won over a dozen acting awards for her work in live action TV and film. And the English version by Victoria Grace. This is her first role in anime, but she's appeared in 47 Ronin with Keanu Reeves, Comedy Bang Bang, the School of Rock TV series, and will be in The Last of Us Part 2. The father is voiced by good old boy Gen Hoshino, who is a popular Japanese singer-songwriter. You might have heard him in The Night is Short, Walk On Girl, because he was senpai. And he also voiced Buddha in Saint Young Men. In English, John Cho, who was who was in Harold and Kumar as Harold. Sulu in the Star Trek movies, and he also appears in How I Met Your Mother, BoJack Horseman, and Drunk History. That's a very interesting choice.
Yeah, if you're somebody that's familiar with American pop culture, you know who John Cho is, even if you don't know his name.
Man, that's wild.
Yeah, he's been a lot of stuff.
The mother is voiced by Kumiko Aso. She's mostly a live-action voice actress, or excuse me, not a voice actress. You don't do voice work in live action mostly.
She's also a body actress.
She's most notably a live-action actress, but she has appeared in bit parts in Wolf Children, Miss Hokusai, Colorful, and The Boy and the Beast. In English, you'll find Rebecca Hall playing the mother. She's a British stage and screen actress who was in Christopher Nolan's The Prestige, Ron Howard's Frost Nixon, Iron Man 3, Disney's The BFG, and will be in Godzilla vs. King Kong in 2020. I just feel like I'm doing an advertisement.
You are.
The quote-unquote mysterious man, or quote-unquote the prince, is voiced by Mitsuo Yoshihara, apparently whose only other credit that was findable was the voice of Gaston in the Japanese live-action Beauty and the Beast. He did the dub voice. And in English is Crispin Freeman, who you might know as Alucard in Hellsing, Shizuo in Durarara, Kyon in Haruhi Suzumiya, and apparently Winston in Overwatch. I had no idea.
He's also Will Turner in Kingdom Hearts, and he will be coming back to play Will Turner in Kingdom Hearts 3, which is exciting.
Yeah, I love Crispin Freeman.
Me too. If you're an anime fan and you've watched an English dub, you've probably heard of Crispin Freeman.
Yeah.
He is very popular. Alright, so would you also tell us generally what this movie is about?
Yeah, this is shaming me for not wanting to write the synopsis, isn't it?
Only a lot.
Anyway, so the story follows a young couple and their son, Kun, who's around 5 years old. Their quiet life together is quickly interrupted when a new baby is added to the household, Mirai. Kun is entranced with Mirai, but quickly learns that a new baby is a lot of work and his parents aren't giving him the attention he used to have all to himself. After reaching his boiling point, Kun constantly gets into fights with his parents and eventually tries to run away from home. Through a series of dreams and visions, Kun encounters his past family members and other fantastical characters who teach him life lessons that help him process the complex emotions he's dealing with and having to grow up and adjust to his new life. I dabbed, but you couldn't see it.
I could see it. I knew that you would do that. Okay. So, one thing that Hosoda was really quick to note in the short interview presented after the film screening is that the movie is very heavily based on his own experiences observing his children. So, the idea that Mirai, the little sister, coming back in time to visit her big brother, and he's still a child, was based on a dream that Hosoda's son told him about, where he had a vision of his grown-up little sister in a middle school uniform coming back in time and telling him that he had to do something, or something weird like that.
But she was numerically older, not a giant baby.
Correct.
He made sure to specify that.
Exactly, because I'm sure that, because Hosoda is a big anime nerd, I'm sure that as soon as his son told him that, he was like, what? Spirited Away? What? Because, Hosoda he wears his anime fandom on his sleeve. He's got a lot of things that influence him in that. He even said that one of the first things that got him interested in becoming an anime director was watching Lupin III, The Castle of Cagliostro, and I'm just like, you got good taste, man. Good taste. We just reviewed that, and that was fun. Mm-hmm. So, and a lot of the anxieties that Kun presents in the film are sort of based on Hosoda's son's own experiences that he observed. So like him getting jealous that his little sister is hogging the parents' attention, and the fact that, like, he can't play rough and tumble with his little sister like he could with his parents or other kids his age or something like that, and just not understanding that babies are different, and him not understanding that he is no longer, like, his parents' sole responsibility anymore.
Yeah.
And that he also has a responsibility to make sure that he takes care of the little sister too. So, Tori, generally speaking, what did you think of the movie?
I really liked it. And I thought it was interesting that we both went in, like you said, you had only heard things about it, and all the, like, stuff I had heard or read about it seemed to generally praise it. So I was kind of scared going through, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a sweet movie, and it had a lot to say, I think, and that came across very well.
So a lot of the criticisms that I heard going into it were from, like, folks that generally have an issue with Hosoda's films in general, and I guess personally I don't really have much of a beef with him as some other folks do, because I've generally enjoyed all of his movies. I mean, obviously I like some of them more than others, and we can get into our juicy rankings later on, because I know everybody wants to hear that. But yeah, like, that's generally where I was coming from, and it seems that people that are generally inclined to like Hosoda's work enjoyed this movie, and people that are generally inclined to not really be such a big fan of him didn't really like it. So I guess it's more of a, like, and this is sort of a rigid way of putting it, I don't mean it to be so definitive, because it isn't, but it's like, if you enjoyed his other stuff and really like it, you will probably also really like Mirai.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because I think it pulls from some of the same cloth as something like Wolf Children, because it's got some similar themes. Except, like, Wolf Children is much more so from the parental figure's point of view, because it really is about Hana's struggle in raising her kids, whereas this movie is very strictly from Kun's point of view. Like, you get the parents' perspective on it, but generally the story is about him learning to sort of cope with the new situation that he's been put into, and learning to grow up in the ways that a 5-year-old needs to learn how to grow up. I mean, it's not like he's going through puberty or anything, but I mean, he's going into a new phase of his life as no longer the only child. He now has a collection of responsibilities and a collection of expectations put upon him by the fact that he is now the older sibling in a house that used to just have one kid, and that one kid used to be him. And I think that was illustrated in a really humorous way whenever he talks to their dog. That sounds weird to say out of context, but this movie does have, like, a fantastical element to it, and we'll definitely get into that too. But he has a conversation with the family dog, and the dog's basically like, I used to be the center of everybody's attention, and then you came along, took that all away from me. And then Kun was just like, you could tell that he realizes that, like, oh, that's happening to me too. Like, I also feel bad that I am no longer the center of attention. So I hate my sister because she takes my parents away from me, and in that sort of, like, 5-year-old understanding of the world.
So speaking of fantastical elements, what did you think about that being in the film, considering it was kind of, well, I mean, we've seen it in his other movies where it's like a mix of kind of fantastical but rooted in reality as well. But how did you think that affected the movie overall? Did that add anything? Do you think it would have been better had that not been there, or?
So I thought that the whole time travel thing where he encounters, like, his big sister from a different point in time, and he visits, or he has encounters with his other family members, like his grandmother and his great grandfather, and his mother, in sort of very fantastical ways, and through visions and experiences that are much more fantastical, more like nightmarish. I thought that they were a really good sort of extended metaphor to convey the sort of ideas that he was going through. to sort of see it put through a child's perspective in the way that they're going to imagine things that adults would see as ordinary or sort of standard as much more fantastical, much more frightening, and much more exciting than we tend to think about it in our normal ways that we process things as adults. So as a metaphorical tool, I thought that they were very interesting. Like especially the scene where he gets lost in the train station, and how scary and overwhelming that was for him.
Yeah.
Even though, like, for adults, we would sort of have the tools and the ability to sort of get ourselves out of that situation with relative ease, perhaps. But him being a child, having to navigate this massive train station, like, all on his own, and not having anyone there, and sort of encountering these strange people that are trying to help him but don't really know how because he doesn't have the tools to help himself, it's really scary stuff, and it really helps to sort of convey to an adult audience what this child might be feeling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think too it shows I think you kind of said this too, it shows a very like kind of true perspective of how kids view things, because it's like, for example, when I was 5, if my parents told me, oh, it's going to take 30 minutes to get somewhere, I'm like, okay, we're in this car for 20 years now. But, like, as an adult, I can be like, okay, well, 30 minutes, I can get through this album, or I can listen to almost all of this podcast, or something like that. And seeing kind of how, kids deal with, I guess, abstract concepts, is that the word I'm looking for? I don't know. In these, like, really, like, fantastical, sort of ways where it's like, oh, I'm mad at my parents for having a baby. I bet the dog feels that way too, huh? And so.
Yeah, and that was a really interesting way to put that, because it's like, well, yeah, if your pet could talk, that's probably what they would say if you had a baby. Because it's just like, well, why aren't you why don't you pet me more like you used to?
Why don't you feed me gourmet dog food anymore, huh?
Right. So I think that is one thing that the movie, I guess in its advertisement, sort of like hammers home, but it's not really about that. It's because I think the advertising sort of hypes up the fact that, like, oh, his big sister has come, or his little sister has come back to visit him for some grand adventure, and it's like, well, it's sort of about that, but it's really more portrayed as in, like, he's having these, like, dreams or daydreams or visions that end up like teaching him lessons or something. Like, it felt a lot like,
it's basically A Christmas Carol.
Yeah, in a way. No, in a way that's a pretty good way to put it. It general, like, the film structure in general sort of follows, like, maybe a year or so of their life, or probably not even a year, maybe a couple of months, because Mirai doesn't really grow that old as a baby.
I'd say it's probably I'd say it's a little under a year, because eventually you start to see her, like, sitting up, and she's becoming more, like, sentient, and she can crawl. And
Yes.
So some time has passed. I would say probably little about almost a year.
Right, and so that's what the main story goes through. Like, it's very much like a day in the life, slice of life sort of thing, sort of interrupted by these interstitial moments where Kun has fantastical visions, or, like, travels to different time periods to encounter different people and things that help him learn a specific lesson about whatever it is that he's dealing with at that time. And, like, for example, the whole him getting lost in the train station thing stems from him having a very sort of obsessive fascination with trains. So that's something that in his little kid mind would sort of stand out because that's something that he thinks a lot about. He thinks about trains. So of course that would sort of like invade his dreams and his daydreams and stuff like that. And then setting that up and then using the trains as a vision to talk about his separation anxieties from his parents. And like, because the whole train sequence comes about whenever he thinks that his parents have left the house without him. And then the vision sort of begins, and he's on this mysterious train, and he gets to this like sort of maze-like version of Tokyo Station. And having been to Tokyo Station, it's really not that bad. But it's like,
good.
But like for a 5-year-old, it would be pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
But like that whole exercise was like him working out in his mind, like, well, what would happen if I ever really did get separated from my parents? I don't know that I would be able to deal with that because I don't even know my mom and dad's name.
Oh man, that was like, I was just thinking about that during that scene, and I was like, what age was I when I like conscientiously like acknowledged my parents had names? Like when did I know that?
And just to provide a little bit of context if you haven't seen the movie, so he gets to basically like the lost and found area of the train station, and like the very creepy like desk attendant robot dude asks him like, okay, so you're lost, what's your mom's name? And he's just like, I don't know.
Mom?
Okay. Mom? Yeah. So, and then he's like, okay, so what's your dad's name?
Dad?
Dad? And it's just like, we don't have enough information. It's like, do you have any other family members? And then he gives them the dog's name. And then they're just like, sorry, we don't accept pet names.
Yeah. Pets aren't family members. And I'm like, oh, okay, hold on now.
But like, and that kind of made me wonder, and I wanted to look it up. I'm just like, so is it not really expected so much in Japan for kids to know their parents' real names until later on in their life or something? I don't know. Because I had the same question too. I was thinking about it myself. I'm just like, did I always know that my mom and dad were named their actual names, or did I have to learn that later on? I don't know.
I don't remember.
I don't remember either. But anyway, that was a fun thing to explore, and I think Hosoda brought a lot of insight and wisdom through his own personal experiences with his kids to really make Kun a very, very believable child.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't spent much time around any 5-year-olds, but like, I don't know, what was your insight on the realism for Kun as a kid?
Well, as someone who's the oldest. Huh?
Yeah, I was about to say, because you had a little sister much more recently than I had a little brother.
Yeah, as the oldest of 3, I was sentient enough to remember most of their, like, growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh man, I just, oof. Yeah, it is pretty much like that every day.
So did your little sister try and thwack you with a train?
Funny story.
Or did you try and thwack them with the train?
No, actually, because I was when I found out both times that I was getting siblings, I was just like, okay. I didn't care one way or another. And, I'm sure there's a multitude of reasons for that, that I'm not really gonna get into, but, I was just kind of like, okay, cool. And then, when they arrived, I was like, babies. But, funny story, and my sister's actually here at the house, but I know full well she would not come here and tell this or even admit to it, but when I was probably, let's see, how old would she have been? She probably had to have been 4 or 5, so this was like 2004, 2005. I was sitting in the living room watching TV with my back to we had like in our old house, we had like a big open living room, and then the kitchen was off to the side, and I was just sitting in front of the TV, back turned, and she came up behind me and thwacked me in the head with a Nintendo 64 controller.
Amazing.
Because she wanted to be the only child.
Wow.
So my sister tried to murder me when she was 5 or 4, somewhere between there. And that's about it. My youngest sister, she never did anything crazy, but middle sister, she also wouldn't talk to my parents or our parents for like 3 weeks when she found out the next one was coming. She like went and lived with our grandparents for 3 whole weeks, and then finally was just like, well, I guess there's nothing I can do about this.
Wow.
Yeah.
And like we were talking a little bit about this whenever we walked out of the theater, but it seems like there's a breadth of experiences when it comes to how you react to getting a sibling. Like me, like whenever I think about it back in, because I was maybe 3 whenever I found out that I was going to have a little brother, like remembering back to that moment, it's like I was sort of like generally excited, but didn't really have much of a feeling about it one way or another.
Uh-huh.
I didn't really form a relationship with that idea until much later, after the brother actually came home. And then even then, I don't remember exactly how I processed that. Didn't seem like much of a positive or a negative thing in general. Like I just thought like, oh, well, I guess things are different now. I guess I got a little brother. I guess it's the way it is now. So that's neat.
Yeah, and I was there with my mom when she was in labor with my youngest sister because my dad couldn't get home in enough time. And I think that was kind of a life-changing experience because I had never like had been there for somebody like that before, so that was really scary. And I feel like if I had another sibling, I'd just be like, okay, no, you can find somebody else to go with you because I don't want to be there.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it was scary. It was very scary.
I believe it. So I guess going back to the fantastical elements of the film for just a little bit, they are definitely, we've sort of talked about this a little bit already, but they're definitely fantastical in a different way than Hosoda typically uses his movies. Because like in The Boy and the Beast, for example, like the whole beast world is implied to be some sort of like other realm that you can travel to. And in Wolf Children, there's like this implication that there used to be this race of like werewolf people, and like they've all died out, and now the kids are like half werewolf, half human sort of thing. So he roots a lot more of his fantasticalism in sort of being part of the world that he's created. But in this movie, it's a lot more metaphorical, I think. Because like in The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, like she encounters that weird device that gives her the supernatural ability to like fly back in time or something. In this, like Kun just sort of experiences visions of past family members and experiences situations where these magical things just start happening. So it really does beg the question for the audience. It's just like, okay, so is this really happening, or is this just a manifestation of his anxieties, or is it some weird meld of both? So I think early on, if you get over that hurdle of like these things are not necessarily really happening, and you sort of look at each of the visions as sort of like metaphors, it helps the movie be more understandable in the actual messages it's trying to say. Would you agree or disagree?
No, I would agree with you, and we kind of like had this discussion a little bit earlier and then the day that we saw it. But I think it is kind of like all subconscious, and it's not so much that it's really happening to him, because I think when it clicked for me was the scene where he was learning to ride his bike, and then those little boys came up to him, and it was so kind. They were just like, we'll help you learn, come on. I wasn't even expecting that. I was like, well, they're gonna bully him, aren't they? But and then he has
that scared me too. I was really hoping that would not happen. I'm so glad that he didn't get bullied by those older kids.
I know. And then he had the vision of like his great grandpa teaching him to ride the horse and then the motorcycle. But when they go in the stable, his great grandpa's like, hey, anybody else here? And then you see these like, I guess, stable hands pop out, and they're like, yeah, we are, but they look like a couple of them, it's like 2 or 3 of them maybe, they look like the boys that he had interacted with earlier. And then that's when it kind of was like, oh, I see what they're doing. And then I think before then, no, it was after then, is when he saw the picture of his great grandpa and was like, that's my dad. And I think the same thing happened when he saw the picture of his mom when she was young. It was after that he had the whole scenario of meeting his mother when she was just a child.
Right, right. So I think it's sort of at the base level of this movie. It's a little bit confusing to me to try and figure out exactly who this movie is for, because I think it's a little bit too intense and a little bit too difficult for this to be a movie for 5-year-olds. To sort of be like, oh, I'm gonna show this to my kid who just got a new sibling, and maybe he can learn how to be a good brother or something like that. And it's like a little bit removed from adulthood to be like really for adults. So I'm just kind of wondering who this movie is for, or maybe this is just a movie that he really wanted to make because like kids are such a big part of his life right now, being a dad.
Yeah.
And maybe that really is it. Maybe it was just sort of a movie to sort of...
Like a comfort piece, basically.
Yeah, a comfort piece in, like, family relationships, but also something to be like, here's a good movie to show parents how to relate to how their kids think, or something.
I think my theory is that Abe held a gun to him and said, make more baby propaganda. And so this movie was made.
Yep, that's it. Nailed it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think you might be maybe underestimating kids a little bit. I think if I saw this movie when I was really young, I'd be like, man, that kid's a jerk. Maybe I shouldn't
That's
hit
true.
babies with trains.
That is
like
true.
my sister hit me with a Nintendo 64 controller.
Right. That is true. I probably am underestimating kids' ability to grab onto things.
I think the real thing, watching it, I got from it was, while it was a comfort piece for himself, I think it very much was maybe meant for other parents or other, adults maybe reaching that age of becoming parents. Especially with the scene of where he meets his mother, and she's a huge brat, and she's doing things that she yells at him all the time for doing.
Yes.
And it's kind of hypocritical because, you did that when you were a child. I mean, I'm sure all of our parents were brats, no matter how, super strict or angry or whatever they are now. They were brats and getting in trouble constantly, I'm sure, when they were children, too.
Right, right.
And it's just
it's sort of like a weird reverse empathy thing going on here, because it's not like they did a story where a parent becomes a 5-year-old again. It's
right.
It's the 5-year-old learning what the parents were like.
And I think I kind of took it as remember you were there once too. Maybe screaming at your child isn't the best answer, because remember how that made you feel. And things like that. I don't know. That's what I got.
Right. I think that there's a lot of that in that movie for sure. And then for kids, it may help them relate to their parents a little bit more, to understand that your mom and dad, they're your mom and dad now, but they used to be kids when they were younger.
Believe it or not.
Yeah, exactly. No matter how ancient your parents may be, they used to be kids once upon a time.
That and that it's okay to feel upset in this situation, I think, too. Even though his parents were kind of at times don't do that, it's fine. But, it's, I understand why that is hurtful to children, even though I never personally felt that way. I can understand. It's my parents don't care about me anymore now that they've got this new little thing, and it's not even that. It's just a baby takes a lot of work that you necessarily don't now that you're 5 years old and can eat and mostly use the bathroom by yourself and entertain yourself and things like that. So
I think that goes into another thing that we could talk about. What did you think of the parents in the movie?
I think they were doing their best. There were certain times where I would get kind of angry at the mom because yelling at your kids is not the problem solver.
Right.
And the dad, bless him, he was doing everything he could. And it's I understand, people getting absorbed in their work. But also, when you have kids, you kind of have to, not do that so much. You know what I mean? And this is me, speaking from a place of not actually having children, but helping raise 2 children. It's just, they are just as much deserving of your time as your work is, no matter how much you have to do. And at the end of the day, like they grew. Like there was that
Mm-hmm.
scene where, um, they were packing up to go on their little vacation, and uh, the dad was talking about like wanting to be more involved, and like they had just seemed to grow as parents, and I mean, that's how it should be.
And one thing that the mom kept mentioning is how like aloof the dad was during whenever he was first born. And
Hmm.
I'm like, you've said that like 3 times now. Why couldn't the movie just show us that?
Yeah. Um.
Because the way that the dad was portrayed in the time period of the movie, like I thought he had it a little bit too together, honestly. Like he was very like a little klutzy, but he was also
Mhm.
pretty functional, I thought.
Well, too,
Like,
I think he was trying to overcompensate for like not being there originally for their first child.
yes.
And that's why he was always like, ha ha ha, I'm cleaning the kitchen, I'm cooking, I'm mingling with the housewives because I want them to know I am such a good, great dad. And I love that the mom called him out on that.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, you need to just do it instead of pretending to do it. And I was like,
Yeah,
yes.
but that didn't really click with me so much because I never really felt like the dad was doing that. Like it wasn't clear to me that he was trying to he was trying to act like a better dad than he actually was.
Hmm.
It just seemed to me like he was doing the dad stuff and generally succeeding at it, but just
Hmm.
being a little bit klutzy and a little bit tired. Like
Mm.
I think it would have added a little bit more to his depth if we saw him more like legitimately struggle with dealing with his kids, I guess.
Well, he kind of did, like with every time he held Mirai, how she would always cry, and he's like, "Oh, I can't do this," like that kind of stuff. So it,
That's true.
hmm
But I mean, I guess he just had a funny way of showing it because he just sort of got overwhelmed in a comedic way, whereas like the
hmm
mom, whenever she got overwhelmed, she just got really angry.
yeah,
And I mean, that makes sense because obviously people process things in different ways.
hmm
But I think it would have just been a nice touch of characterization to either see like some flashback scenes of him being very uninvolved back whenever Kun was a baby,
hmm
or to see just a little bit more like raw frustration from the dad rather than him just sort of being a little
yeah,
bit on the goofy
goofy
side.
side, yeah, yeah. Dads need to be involved. They did half the work, so.
Right, right. And it's not I mean, I'm being a little bit too harsh on him. I mean, he's generally the mom and the dad in this movie are very good. They're very good parents that make sort of like everyday standard mistakes.
Hmm.
Um but yeah, I just think it would have added a little bit more to his character cuz I generally really liked the dad. He was just a little bit too um hey kids, I'm a dad sort of thing.
Yeah, but I did like the stay-at-home dad dynamic because
Oh yeah.
I think it's changing in Japan, but that's not a very common thing at all.
Mhm.
Whereas like I feel like in America it's a little bit more common.
Definitely.
Um, and it's so funny because people will rag on men for that all the time, but I'm like, if somebody's like if you are in such a position, if you are lucky enough to be in such a position where one of the parents can do that
Mhm.
to be with their kids, so you're not and like nothing wrong, if you can't do that, or you have to get a nanny or take your child to daycare, but I feel like you know it's nice to be able to do that because you're there for all these moments, and you're able to spend time with your child and things like that, and get to see and experience things you might not if they're with a caretaker or something like that.
Of course, of course. All right, so I guess in wrapping up here, there's probably a lot more we could talk about. We're just gonna go ahead and wrap it up just to keep this episode pretty short. So I guess for you, Tori, what was your biggest takeaway from the movie in terms of like both like the movie as a film and like sort of what lessons you thought it was trying to ascribe?
Hmm. um I think empathy is a big thing, um and understanding. and trying to like rationalize instead of giving in to so much like black and white thinking, like just because your parents have another kid doesn't mean they love you any less. Or trying to just understand instead of having such visceral reactions before you know everything. And it really speaks to a lot of like how complicated familial dynamics can be. Especially if you're a child and you don't quite have the knowledge or the vocabulary of someone who might be, you know, double your age, or triple your age because he's only like 5.
Yeah. I think mainly the lesson can be like that kids sometimes have it tough, even if you understand and can rationalize sort of, and even if you can understand a way and rationalize away sort of the problems that kids might go through, it doesn't mean that those kids aren't having those problems. Like sometimes they just need to have a moment where they can learn and understand what's going on around them, and maybe you shouldn't expect them to get it right away. And just sort of some of the cosmic things too about being like, well, you know, there's thing like whether or not you have a good relationship or a bad relationship with your family members, like there are things that they can teach you, maybe not necessarily directly, but there are things that you can look back on and be like, okay, so my family member made a mistake here that impacted their life in this way, or they did something right that impacted their life in this way, and I can learn from that. And that's something that this movie shows, like in specifically within the context of like generational family members. But I mean, obviously that's true for people that are not your family. And I guess just more in a general sense of just like learning from previous generations and things like that, because they also go into that as well.
Yeah, and I like that because that's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about, like when I'm lying awake at night and I can't sleep, and I'm just like, wow, like if I hadn't have done XYZ, I might not have been doing ABC or something like that, you know what I mean? And that just always, that keeps me awake more than it should.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because you really never know how those things work out. Like, like they show that whole scene where Kuhn's great-grandfather was, like, in World War II, and he got injured, and his leg was, like, basically wrecked for the rest of his life. But, you know, he went back and got a job with a motorcycle company, and he met his great-grandmother, and they had that cute little race that they did.
I know, that was so cute.
And, like, you never know. Maybe if he hadn't got that injury, it wouldn't have worked out that way. So, who knows?
Right, yeah. So, everything happens for a reason, more than likely.
It does. Make sure you put the dolls away so that your little sister can marry on time.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think now's a good time to sort of talk about going into our Twitter questions. But before that, as we always do, Tori, what was what is the most iconic moment in this movie for you?
Oh boy. I would have to say I like the scene a lot where, and this probably might not stick out to people at all, but I like the scene a lot where Kuhn gets to kind of see himself in the future.
Oh yeah.
And Mirai is like, that boy, pretty cool, right? I thought that was cute. But I know you didn't ask me for 2, but I also really liked the scene where the great-grandma and the great-grandpa raced against each other. That was really cute, too.
Yeah, I love that. That was cool.
What about you?
I thought it was really funny whenever Kuhn is trying to get Mirai to play with him, and he basically fills her crib up with the toys.
Yes.
Like the little trains are just surrounding her. And, like, the mom freaks out. She's like, don't do that.
Even though he wasn't really, you know, like, harming her, he was just a little too in her personal space.
Yeah, she was like, you can't play with her like that yet, or something. But one of the sequence that definitely stands out to me the most is whenever he gets lost in the train station.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that is a very creepy, very well executed feeling of dread that they really put forward in that whole sequence.
Right, and it was so unexpected too. I was just like, how'd we get here?
Yeah, definitely. It felt like a completely different movie for a while.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was very strange, but I really, really enjoyed that.
Yes.
And overall, I think I enjoyed this movie. I think one of the Twitter questions is, oh yeah, it's the first Twitter question, and I think we've got it multiple times. But anyway, let's just go into those. So in his typical fashion, our buddy Basil over at It's Basil Time on Twitter, he asks multiple questions, as he does, a question marathon. So how does this movie compare to Hosoda's previous films?
Well,
Alright, so I guess we should just go ahead and rank them now.
Okay, well, let's see. So, The Boy and the Beast is the only one that I have not seen because I just haven't gotten around to it yet. So that one's going to be in last place for me because I just don't know where that ranks.
Just by default.
Yeah. So number one for me, this is really hard because honestly, in my heart of hearts, these movies are really tied. But number one for me would have to be The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. Because that was the first one I ever saw, and it's just everything I kind of want about a romance story, I don't know. So that's number one. Then I would say Wolf Children, but really, they're tied for me.
You have to decide. We have to rank them. You have to decide.
Alright. Girl Who Leapt Through Time.
Okay.
Wolf Children. I would say Mirai, and then Summer Wars, and then Boy and the Beast by default because I haven't seen it.
Okay. So it's my turn. So I rewatched Wolf Children earlier this year, and fell in love with it more than I ever had. Because I watched it the first time and thought, this movie was alright, and then I watched it again, I'm just like, I love this movie. It's really good. I think it still has some problems, mainly in pacing, but that one's still my number one. Followed closely by The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. And after that would be... I haven't seen it in a while. But I think Summer Wars would be third, with Mirai right after it, and The Boy and the Beast at the bottom.
Okay.
I think that would be my final ranking.
That feels right.
So ours is very similar, except, well...
The first two.
The first two. Well, you put Mirai above Summer Wars, right?
Actually, yeah, I did.
Okay, so yeah, our lists are pretty different, so...
I think it's because, like, somebody is gonna crucify me for this, but I feel like if I wanted to watch Summer Wars, I would just go watch the Digimon movie, because I was, like, so into Digimon as a kid.
Yeah, that criticism never landed on me, because I never saw that movie, so I've always looked at Summer Wars as its own thing.
Yeah, no, I watched the Digimon movie so much as a child.
Okay, well that definitely makes sense because he worked on that movie too.
Yes.
But yeah, I get people's comparisons of that to Summer Wars very much so, but it's something that falls on deaf ears for me because I never saw it. But I really need to revisit Summer Wars because there are some elements of it that I really enjoy, and there are some elements of it that I remember not liking very much. So it really deserves a rewatch for me, and it turns 10 years old in 2019, so we'll probably be doing a podcast on it, so look out for that. Okay, so Basil also asks, are there any elements that you think this film carries over from his previous ones? Yes, and we kind of already talked about it.
I think as soon as that little mini interview was over, I just looked at you and I was like, well, it had the trifecta. Furries, time travel, and white backgrounds with really colorful lines.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a little visual nod to Summer Wars that I thought was not too on the nose, but enough that people who have seen Summer Wars will be like, oh, that looks familiar.
And it worked. It worked for that scene, too.
Yeah,
it was fine. Executed very well, and most definitely. I feel like just about everything he does is about family in some way, and then there's always some sort of furry creature. So Yeah, I mean it's similar enough to everything he's done before, but it still stands out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's more impressionistic and more emotion based rather than narrative based than
Yes.
some of his other things because it deals so heavily in like extended metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's not really been anything else that he's really done that with. Like maybe you could say that The Girl Who Leapt Through Time is like a long metaphor for accepting that you don't have control of your life.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still implied to be like, no, she actually does have time travel powers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's beside the point. He also asks, have you downloaded the free Line stickers yet? Do you use Line? You should. Please add me on Line.
I didn't
no.
know. I didn't even know
I
there were
haven't-
line stickers.
Yeah, I didn't know either,
Yeah.
so I haven't downloaded them, but I should, and I will
Yeah.
definitely add you on Line, Basil.
Uh-huh. I only use Line to play mobile games.
Me too. Tsum Tsum is the best game ever.
Yeah.
So Annie Bros Creative asks, did you feel like this movie made you want to have kids or not have kids?
Okay, so Makia gave me baby fever, and then this movie grounded me back into reality.
I think that answers the question pretty well. I think you answered it better than I ever could have.
I mean, just to elaborate on it, like, if I ever get to that point in my life, sure, but I think I've mentioned before, probably when we were talking about Makia, I am terrified of childbirth and just having children. Not to mention, like, I'm afraid that, like, you know, I'm not going to be a good parent, or, like, all of my issues are going to, like, transfer into them, and it's like, I don't want to do that to somebody, but, I think it just reminds you of, like, you know, this is a good thing for some people. You just have to remember it's a lot of work, and there's no perfect way to do it, and there's never going to be a perfect way, and you just kind of have to do the best you can do while trying your best.
This is totally going to date this podcast, but I don't know if I feel comfortable bringing a child into a world where you can't eat romaine lettuce.
Or Tide Pods.
That dates it even worse.
You know, the romaine thing has been so bad because once somebody tells me I can't do something, that's when my little lizard brain is like, do it. I've never wanted to eat romaine lettuce so bad as I have right now.
Okay. So our good buddy Bill, co-host on this podcast, asks, Hosoda's films, compared to other anime directors, seem to polarize people. Either you love his films or strongly dislike them. Why do you think that is? I think that sort of comes with him getting a lot of notoriety very quickly for, like, one thing. Mm-hmm. Because he was relatively in the background of things until The Girl Who Leapt Through Time came out. And then The Girl Who Leapt Through Time was, like, almost universally praised back in the day. Like, everybody seemed to like it, to really love that movie, and it won a lot of awards, etc., etc. And I think when there are creators that have a lot of stake put in them very early on, it tends to polarize people either to the positive or the negative. Like, they start attaching expectations to him and things like that. And I think some people, if they just haven't, if his movies haven't really clicked with them at all so far, they sort of look at a future Hosoda project with being like, oh, here comes this guy again making another movie I'm not gonna like. And I'm like, well, I mean, you don't know until you see it, you know. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think he doesn't have any more unique polarization than any other creator would have, especially someone that gets praised a lot. Mm-hmm. Because there's always going to be people that look at a creator that is popular and be like, they're not that great or something. And I'm not saying that to say that Hosoda is somehow above reproach. I mean, his movies they're not my favorite, honestly. I think he's made some really good movies, but they're not my favorites. But I think that's where it's coming from. I don't think it's really anything unique to Hosoda in general. Mm-hmm. And I think, at least maybe lately, since the reception to The Boy and the Beast wasn't so high, then maybe that sort of harsh critique is a little bit more raw, I suppose.
I was thinking about it when that question popped up, and I thought maybe it's just because he kind of makes what he wants to. I think he kind of just makes what he wants to watch versus like what he knows is immediately going to be like, oh, this is the best thing ever. But then I'm kind of just like, well, other creators do that too, and everything
I mean, I would much rather have a creator make a movie that they want to see rather than something that they think is going to be popular, because then that's how you get Darling in the Franxx.
Absolutely. And I think anybody who makes things should do it because it's what they want to see and not just like, oh, if I, draw this fan art, I'm going to get 30,000 retweets on Twitter. But then it's like, I was thinking about that and I was like, well, there's other creators out there that, operate under that, but it seems like everything they release is always like, yeah, this is good, this is great. So, I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit of that and a little bit of what you said too at the same time.
Probably. It's probably many things.
Mm-hmm.
Bill also asks, were you surprised that G-Kids released this movie since Funimation has released every Hosoda movie up to this point? I mean, that's kind of just a business thing that I don't really have much of a say or like input on or perspective on, really. It was probably just the luck of the bid at that point, like whoever got to the licensor quick enough and whoever had enough money to put up for the project probably was the one that got it, and this time it was G-Kids. I'm sure Funimation bid for it, but I guess they just didn't get it.
I thought G-Kids released Boy and the Beast.
Nope, that was Funimation.
Okay. See, that shows how much I know, because I had no idea it was Funimation until just right now.
Yep, they just released the Mamoru Hosoda Blu-ray box set collection that has the four other movies.
Oh.
But G-Kids has Mirai.
I
guess it's a little unfortunate for consistency's sake on your shelf.
Yeah.
But like generally I like G-Kids a little bit more than Funimation, because G-Kids, not to be mean to Funimation, but G-Kids has a bit of higher standards in general.
I think maybe the reason I didn't know that was because until now I had never seen a Hosoda movie in the theaters.
Oh.
So, and that's not normally something I pay attention to, but yeah, you're right about the standards thing.
Yeah, Funimation, especially lately, seems to just like license everything and put it all out no matter what it is.
Which is really a bad move, because there's just some things that don't deserve the light of day.
Yeah, and it sort of reminds me about how certain companies were in the early 2000s, like ADV and Geneon and stuff like that, where they would just license everything and put everything out. And that's sort of what led to the bubble bursting, and right. I really don't want to see that happen, even though it's inevitably going to happen at some point.
And I feel like there's better things that money can go towards.
Maybe, but I don't really want to get in on that, because our perspectives are so... There's so much we don't know. That's true.
License break here, please.
No, that is firmly in the claws of Saban. And I'm very sorry, Tori.
Time to assassinate.
As long as Saban lives, Glitter Force will continue to be the thing. So Edwin asks a question that I can't speak to, sub or dub, and I guess I will use this opportunity to just say that I thought the dub was really good.
Yeah, we saw it dubbed, obviously, but when I was looking at our notes and I was seeing the Japanese cast, I was like, oh man, I wish we had just waited an hour, because there's some really good names here. But yeah, I've noticed with movies, anime movies especially nowadays, the dubs have gotten pretty good. And yeah, I enjoyed it, and I like that they used an actual child in both cases to voice an actual child, because that always makes me happy. You can usually tell when it's an adult trying to be a child, and I think that can come across really awkwardly sometimes, and give children a chance to work, I guess.
They were even more audacious in the English dub with that, because the girl who voiced Kun in Japanese is not a child. She's like 14.
Oh, okay, it said little sister, so I just assumed that she was a child, but never mind. But I mean,
Right.
14's not super old. Most kids still sound pretty young at 14 because they haven't, like, quite hit puberty yet unless they're an early bloomer.
Anyway, they got an 8-year-old to play him in the English version, which I think if they were going to go with the direction of actually casting a boy rather than a girl, it was smart to lean younger.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's pretty cool. But the dub was actually done by NYAV Post, which is Michael Sinterniklaas and Stephanie Shea's dubbing studio. And they've basically dubbed everything that G-Kids has put out. And they also dubbed Your Name and A Silent Voice and all that stuff. And they have really set the new standard for anime dubs, I think.
Yeah, they're doing a lot.
Yeah, they're doing a lot, and everything it's really good stuff. Like, they are setting the bar super high. Everyone asks actually another really good question. Why is the house so horribly designed for children, even though the dad is an architect? That is a really good question. I think he probably just... Well, because you see that early on where she was talking about how, like, he was very aloof during the first kid. So maybe he was still thinking in the mind of, like, cool, hip, innovative architect rather than dad who needs to build a house that's child-proof sort of deal.
Yeah, modern architecture is just a nightmare. But that house reminded me a lot of, like, those fancy wild houses you'll see in, like, horror movies. Where there's, like, all the windows and it's just very weirdly laid out and yeah.
Well, see, to me, I didn't really see it as a really much of I didn't really see it as a horrible design personally. I thought it was kind of neat. So, like, you have the ability for your kid to have the playroom and to be able to play outside, like, right next to each other.
Safely.
And he doesn't... Safely, and you can watch him, and he doesn't even have to leave the house to play outside. And that's kind of a pretty amazing thing. It's just like, you can play outside, inside.
The future is now.
The future is now. All right, Tori, well, I think that wraps us up for this episode. Thank you for being on.
Of course, always glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. And where can people talk to you on Twitter?
You can find me screaming into the void at Worst Waifu.
And you can find me doing things on Twitter over at Bebop Shock. That's Bebop as in Cowboy Bebop and Shock as in Bioshock. And thank you guys for listening to our pretty short episode on Mirai. What did you think of the movie? How does it rank in your list of Hosoda films? What do you think about Mamoru Hosoda as a creator in general? Let us know over on Twitter. We would love to hear what you have to say. And you can find Third Impact Anime in general over on Twitter at TI_anime. And please pop over to Facebook and join our Facebook community. It's a really fun little place that we tried to curate for fans of anime and video games. Just chill and talk to each other and not get bombarded by memes every 15 seconds. Because that is what Facebook anime communities are notoriously about, and we are not about that. So if you want something different, come and join us. We would really love to have you. Alright, well, thank you again for listening, and we will see you in the next one.
Bye!
Mirai.